Right away when we get to the studio, you are complaining about money. Like it never fails. You constantly complain about money.
Well, I know that you have it. I know that you don't like partying with it. And I know that I want it and need it. I heard your podcast right now with Jim Rome on the drive over here.
Yes.
You said that Wembanyama, that tall basketball player, is the most fascinating person, not athlete, that you've ever met in your life simply because he read fantasy books.
That was part of it.
Fantasy books, and he makes it... I read Hemingway.
No, you don't.
Tolstoy, Dostoevsky. I'm from East LA.
You skim Hemingway. You skim Tolstoy.
You think this man is more fascinating because he reads anime and fantasy books?
20 years old. Geek? And that's one of the reasons he's the most fascinating guy I've ever talked to. Not the only reason, but one of the reasons.
And you compliment anyone who's in front of you. You're what's that one Japanese saying? A man is a room that he walks in. That's you.
I have no idea if that's actually a Japanese saying.
It might be the Chinese or Japanese. A man is a person in the room he is. Something like that. Right. Whatever. Anyway,
we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt. All right, let's jump right into this week's show. On Saturday, we had Bakram Murtaliev defended his 154-pound title, stopping Tim Tszyu in the third round of that fight. Bakram knocked Tszyu down 4 times before Tszyu's corner threw in the towel. After the fight, though, Sergio, you went on Twitter and did what you usually do, which is just verbally vomit on social media, whatever dumbass take was on your mind at that time. Your tweet was, and I quote, "Bad matchmaking in all caps, has knocked out Tim Tszyu out of the championship mix." Grammar aside, explain yourself. Explain why that loss knocked Tim Tszyu out of the championship mix and why bad matchmaking is the reason for it.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to take in there, but let me just go back to my tweet. Yes, I exactly the way I said it. Bad matchmaking has knocked him out of the championship mix because Tim Tszyu was supposed to be the next Australian star. I mean, he had everything going from the power, the looks, the legacy, the last name, and the fact that he went from fighting a 6'6" fighter in Sebastian Fundora, a fighter with an 80-inch reach and a southpaw, that's like the perfect mix of what you don't do. What did Tim Tszyu do? He fought him. Okay, the cut, he was in a tough fight, bloody, messy fight, and he lost. He probably would have won that fight if it wasn't for that cut and that elbow and that accident. Okay, but we're not going to play the probably game. Okay, he lost that fight. What does he do? He goes into his next fight, fights an unknown, undefeated, strong Russian title holder that it seems like he was getting step-aside money for a long time from what I did my research. For 4 years. That means for 4 years, people rather pay him off than fight him.
Yeah, but that was... Can we just give context there? Context, right?
No, wait a minute. The writing was on the wall. Do not fight this man. You have nothing to gain. Boxing is all about, especially if you're in Tim Tszyu's position. In Tim Tszyu's position, where a name, his legacy, and his whole country of Australia backing him is way more important than this fighter from Russia who nobody knew up until now happened to hold a title. No, it was a wrong move, bad matchmaking.
Okay, you could have made this argument earlier in the year when Tim Tszyu fought Sebastian Fundora, because that was a fight that Tszyu took on short notice. He was scheduled to face Keith Thurman, a smallish, rising welterweight orthodox fighter, and instead he turns around and fights Sebastian Fundora, like a 6'6" monster southpaw. Like, you can criticize the matchmaking there. This was not bad matchmaking. This was a fighter saying, you know what? I don't want a tune-up fight. Tune-up fights do nothing for me. This was a guy that went into a fight against Murtaliev and said, I want to win that world title. And let's not make Bakram out to be Ivan Drago here, right? Like, he took step-aside money. Stop.
I must break you.
He took step-aside money only because Jermell Charlo wanted to chase the undisputed championship. So Bakram said, you know what, I'll take some step-aside money, to fight on these other PBC shows. Give me a bigger check, easy fights, keep my career moving. That was a decision that he, Agus Klimas, main events, they decided to make for him. That's fine. But then his last fight, he goes in with Jack Culke, the immortal Jack Culke and his basically life and death with Culke through 11 rounds before eventually scoring the knockout. If you had just watched that Jack Culke fight, would you have said that's a guy to be avoided? That's a guy not to go near? Like, that's crazy to me. He was a title holder. He was a guy that had not proven to be invincible. And Tim Tszyu said, hey, I can beat that guy. Let's also not forget that Tim Tszyu was a 7-1 favorite going into that fight.
Why are you yelling?
Because he was a 7-1 favorite.
We're in a small room. Relax.
No, because you drive me crazy. Your take right there reminded me of that Adam Sandler line of Billy Madison, where I am dumber for actually hearing it and reading it. Tim Tszyu did exactly the right thing. He just had a bad night. Now, we can talk, Sergio, about where he goes from here, but you're never going to convince me that that was bad matchmaking. That's what boxing needs. Good matchmaking and good fights. That was an electric fight that people that are watching on Amazon Prime got their money's worth.
Versus Bakram Murtazaliev. Nobody knew who Murtazaliev, including myself, until I box wrecked him and I found out who he fought and how he fights. And then once I seen the first minute of the first round, then I realized this man was going to be issues. Why don't you talk about my first tweet when I said this guy's going to give problems?
Can't keep up with your tweets.
This guy's going to give problems to Tim Tszyu. It only took me 1 minute and 20 seconds to realize this guy was going to be a headache. Laser-like right hand. He had the uppercut. He had that hook that he ended up dropping him with. He doesn't do anything spectacular. He does everything right. He reminded me a little bit, and I know there's going to be high praise, but just in that 1 minute when he missed that right hand and he threw that left hook, like an Alexis Arguello, where they're laser-like. They don't waste no space. The technique is perfect, and it's not speed that gets you. It's not power that gets you. It's timing and accuracy. That's what I saw with Murtazaliev when he first missed that right hand. And then he threw that left hook, and then he caught him with that right uppercut. I go, man, this is going to be trouble. Even if they weren't landing cleanly, it was going to be a long night for Tim Tszyu. It ended up being a short night because it was a 3-round war that he was at the bad end of, but bad matchmaking, because you go from a 6'6" southpaw to an unknown, strong, undefeated Russian title holder.
Were you in favor? Okay, were you in favor of him fighting Virgil Ortiz?
Hold on,
Should he have fought Virgil Ortiz?
I'm not finished.
Now you're raising your voice.
Yes, because that was Al Pacino line from Carlito's Way. Whenever you're training to fight Keith Thurman, who was an orthodox power puncher, like Tim Tszyu was training to fight, and then you go to fighting a 5'9" orthodox fighter to a 6'6" southpaw, that's bad matchmaking. You go from a 6'6" southpaw that just beat you in your first professional loss for a title to an unknown, undefeated, strong Russian fighter, title holder. Bad matchmaking. You should have got your confidence back with a nice win, with a comeback fight. Not saying that he got knocked out. He lost a split decision in a bloody, messy fight. But come back and knock someone out. Then you can go back and get your swagger back, Mannix, and then you go back and fight a guy like this Russian title holder, but not back-to-back losses, because that's just not smart. It's a bad look, and it's very difficult to come back from.
It's not
from
difficult to come back from. He's going to come back.
He got knocked out. He got dropped 4 or 5 times. He got embarrassed in 3 rounds after losing his first professional fight.
Lots of guys come back
man.
from that. Manny Pacquiao lost to Tim Bradley in his next fight. He got knocked out cold by Juan Manuel Marquez. He bounced back. Like, guys bounce back from that. It's not impossible to do that. Now, where you and I might agree, maybe we don't, but where I think Tim Tszyu, what he needs to address is his corner. Like, his corner has not shown itself to be very good in recent fights. The Sebastian Fundora fight, putting aside the fact that he took the fight, I thought that was a mistake going from Thurman to Fundora. But in that fight, where Tszyu got cut at the top of the head in the second round of that fight, where if you had stopped the fight then, it would have been a no contest. They let that fight continue. His corner, after seeing how deep that cut was, maybe you send him out there for one more round, but at the end of the third round, seeing how deep the cut was and how messed up he was because of it, said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore. We're not risking our status. Instead, they sent him back out there for 8 more rounds of punishment from Sebastian Fundora. That was a mistake. The Tszyu that I saw against Bakram, he didn't show any improvement. Like, there was no head movement in Tim Tszyu. There was no feinting, or not a lot of feinting from Tim Tszyu. If I'm Tszyu, and how I process this loss, I'm saying, you know what? I need to make a change. I know you're pro stay with the same trainer. He's been with this guy for a long time, former Soviet coach, apparently pretty good at getting guys in shape, maybe not so good at the tactics. But if I'm Tim Tszyu, after these 2 losses, I'm revisiting the people on my team because they have done him no good in 2024.
There you go again. Former champion loses his first fight, and you want him to change his entire team.
You just said bad matchmaking.
Loss. Yes, but that's not
trainer
the
has something to do with it. Did your trainer have
boxer.
anything to do with matchmaking?
So does a boxer.
Did your trainer have anything to do with matchmaking? Did Dean Campos have anything to do with matchmaking?
He'll give me his opinion, but it was it was up to me. It was my decision. I would veto it, or he would give me his input. See, the thing about a boxer, he has a team and he listens to that team, even if it's friends' advice or sparring partners' advice. He takes little pieces, little gems for everybody, but ultimately it's the fighter's decision. He gets to say yes or veto a decision. The trainer will give you an input, your manager, your friends, your family. Then ultimately you're the one that says, yeah, I'll take the fight. Tim Tszyu, I hear a lot that he's a throwback fighter. Yes, he is. That sounds great. That's fine. That sounds like everyone wants to hear he's a throwback fighter. Fuck a throwback fighter. You know what a throwback fighter is? A guy who fights anybody, loses, takes a pay cut, takes 2 steps back, and fights another tough fighter. Oh, bravo. I want that guy's guts. Okay, you want that guy's heart? You want that guy's career? I don't want his income because he's taking steps backwards by fighting the best opponents. That's nonsense, man. That's tough guy talk. I want to hear a guy that every single time he has a fight, he gets increase in pay, an increase in pay and an increase in the tougher challenge. That's how you weigh and calculate the risk versus the reward. You don't outweigh the risk for less reward. That's just stupidity. And that's not tough guy talk for me. That's not throwback fighter. That's just dumb matchmaking.
He would have been paid less for a lesser fight. He got paid pretty well to fight for this world title.
Pretty well.
Against a guy. By the way, Sergio, you have to stop talking about.
You know what would have paid him great? If you would have fought Virgil Ortiz. Yeah. And that would have been a winnable fight for Tim Tszyu.
But he couldn't have done it.
Hold on. Winnable fight. Okay, winnable fight. Winnable fight. A massive payday. It would have had more eyes, and it would have been a more significant loss if he did lose against.
Yeah, but if he won this title, he would have been in a better position for bigger paydays moving forward. That's a fact. That is a full stop fact. And again, just to put a button on this, you keep talking about Murtaliev as like he's this killer, like he's an unstoppable force. He was life and death with Jack Culcay. He could have lost that fight against Jack Culcay. Before then, he was fighting nobodies on these PBC undercards. Stop overrating him. Stop acting like he was a killer. Tim Tszyu was a 7-1 our favorite going into this fight. 7-1.
Stop slamming the sofa like that. You act like those women that want your attention by clapping. No, man, stop slamming that. You're not going to make your point.
Stop talking about your wife like that. We don't.
Well, look, man. No, those are slaps in the cheek. Look, man, Tim Tszyu should have kept the resume like he should have. Fighting guys like Jeff Horn in his hometown. Terrell Gaethje, who was a U.S. Olympian, former champion like Tony Harrison.
He was building at that point.
That's what he was doing. And then he regresses. He takes a step back by fighting an unknown title holder because he didn't weigh the risk and the reward.
Yes, but if he had that belt, he could have pushed for a fight against Terrence Crawford. He could have pushed harder for a rematch against Fundora. There would have been a lot more doors open to him if he had won that title.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda, and if. These are all what would have happened if he didn't face this beast, an unknown title holder in Bakram. It was just ignorant matchmaking, man. He should have fought. He should have just wait and cashed in on a payday, man. It was just ignorance.
We got to move on. We're going to talk about the massive light heavyweight title fight overseas this past weekend because William Scull, that's right, Skullheads, William Scull is the new IBF light heavyweight champion. Scull defeated Vladimir Shishkin by unanimous decision. Scull will now become a pretty hot commodity, Sergio, to promoters with rising super middleweights who want to fight for titles. That means Matchroom and Diego Pacheco and Edgar Berlanga, PBC with Caleb Plant, Top Rank or Golden Boy, whoever has Jaime Munguia. I don't want to talk about the fight because if I could if I could reach into my brain and take that dog shit fight out of it, I would. It was so bad. But if you're William Scull and you're waking up today and you know you've got options, what's the best option for William Scull right now?
He needs to go to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
The highest bidder is where he needs to go, because he's not gonna hold that championship for long. He reminds me of like when Caleb Plant. Now, I'm not comparing William Scull to Caleb Plant, but when Caleb Plant won the world title from Uzcategui, they gave him soft touches, man. They gave him soft touches, no names. What they do? They cashed them out with Canelo.
Yep.
They cashed them out with Canelo. So if William Scull has a smart management and a smart promoter and smart advisors, they cash him out too. What they don't want to do is go and fight like a Christian and Billy. Another tough fighter, undefeated, be like a France versus Germany type boxing event. And then that guy gets the winning ticket. No. You wait until a Munguia comes your way, sniffing your way, or a Canelo comes your way, or anyone else, even a Diego Pacheco. Pacheco's a hot commodity, and he has a promoter with a big treasure chest of money. Maybe that one will be it. So just wait. You're in a good position. You picked up a fight after it was one of the worst fights I've ever seen. And you're talking really about a guy that fought Shane Mosley, and everyone thought that was the worst fight they've ever seen.
That was miserable. I think I did extract that from my brain. I agree with you on the money thing. William Scull's got one shot at this, and he's got to make sure that he cashes in. Like Caleb Plant took low-level fights before that Canelo fight. I'm not so sure William Scull wins a lot of low-level fights. I just don't think he's very good. If I'm Scull, and as management team, I'm putting it out there, who wants it? Put your bids in an envelope, and our guy will come to the U.S. and fight your guy, because he's in kind of a similar position to what Charles Martin was in back in 2016. Remember Charles Martin beat the immortal Tsar Glaskov after Tsar's knee gave out in the IBF title fight? Well, Eddie Hearn turned around and paid Charles Martin $5 million to come over to the UK and get his head bashed in by Anthony Joshua. So William Scull is kind of in that exact same position. Now, will Matchroom pony up that type of cash for Diego Pacheco? Maybe. I think Matchroom's probably got the deepest pockets in this particular situation, deeper than Golden Boy, maybe even deeper than Top Rank, which has some issues with its ESPN deal right now. And Pacheco against Scull, that's a good fight for Diego Pacheco. Scull's going to move, but he's not going to be able to. Diego's going to be able to land some big shots on him. So if I'm Matchroom, I'm digging deep and I'm going to try to make that William Scull fight.
I just said that, Chris.
I'm with you. I'm saying the money. I'm agreeing
and not
with you
only that, but if you're Eddie Hearn and decide to shell out this money, even if it is overpaying, this is a fighter that you have had since his pro debut, and you groom them all the way to a world championship. That'll be a second champion that he's built from scratch.
Yep.
That'll be a great track record for Eddie Hearn and Matchroom Promotions. So it doesn't matter if you're going to shell out, you're going to overpay for this world championship, because you're building a star in Diego Pacheco. They've been building them perfectly. They've been matchmaking them perfectly, and now it's time to get him a world title shot against a William Scull, against someone that I think he does very well against.
Look, and if you're Pacheco and if you can get a world title, you're probably not going to get a Canelo fight, but it moves you a little bit closer to being in that mix as a top 168 pounder. Canelo's not going to go to 175. No. He's not going to fight Artur Beterbiev for all those belts. That's crazy. But he's been willing to take on number one contenders, maybe title unification fights, maybe become undisputed all over again. That's the right play for Matchroom, right play for Diego Pacheco, and William Scull would lose, because can we just take a moment to talk about how bad the IBF has been of late? The IBF sanctioned that dog shit fight between William Scull and Vladimir Shishkin. William Scull was the number one contender who did not have one single credible win on his resume. His last fight was an 8-rounder against a guy named Sean Hemphill. And the reason I know that is because it was on the Canelo Munguia card. I arrived really early to watch it, and I was the only one in the building at that time, because nobody else was there to watch that fight. Shishkin was 12-0 coming to that fight. He didn't have a much better resume either. These are not the title contenders you should be talking about. We've got a fight coming up with Boots Ennis taking on Karen Chukadzian in a rematch of one of the worst fights of the 21st century. That was a 12-0 shutout from Boots Ennis about a year and a half ago, and Karen Chukadzian wins 3 fights in a row against nobodies, and all of a sudden he's the mandatory once again. I just saw that Artur Beterbiev, his mandatory is a guy named Michael Eifert, who doesn't have any wins on his resume either. This sanctioning body continues to put total zeros in position to fight for world titles. And I think it's costing boxing something significant.
I think if I check the rankings, I'm probably still ranked in the IBF right now.
You might be. You could, no, you know what though? You could win 3 fights and get back into it.
Yeah, that's my point. No, I agree with you. And it's not just the IBF. They're the culprits as of late. But I mean, if you think back, the WBA has been doing some
but I think they're more
crazy
corrupt
stuff as well.
I think these other sanctioning bodies are more corrupt. The IBF is just goofy. Like if you go through their process of fighting title eliminators in Germany, like you can be in line for a world title shot. And if you're willing to do their 10-pound rehydration, you can be in line for a world title shot.
Listen, man, money talks. It's politics. It's the bigger promoter, whoever's going to put up more money for those sanctioning belts and pay those sanctioning fees. And whoever makes more sense. That's just the politics of the game. So it's nothing new. It's just now it's on the IBF's favor. For a long time, it was the WBA and how many belts they have. I mean, it's ridiculous how many belts they have. For a long time, the WBC was, doing some stuff as well. So it's just politics, and it happens to be all eyes on the IBF right now. But that's the game that we're in, man. And if you want to hold one of those shiny belts and get that shiny belt money, then you got to play game. You got to play ball.
All right. No belts on the line on Saturday when Regis Prograis and Jack Catterall will face off in Manchester. Pretty important fight, though, for both these guys. Prograis coming off a pretty comprehensive loss to Devin Haney last December. Catterall avenged a questionable loss to Josh Taylor this past May. Catterall, we know, Sergio, has something left. He's 31 years old, in his prime. Good win against Josh Taylor. It only has that one loss, the questionable loss to Taylor on his resume. Prograis, I don't know. He had that really ugly win against Danielito Zorrilla and then was completely blanked against Devin Haney. And at 35, I think it is fair to question whether or not Regis has anything left in the tank. Where do you stand on that? You called the last fight with Regis against Devin Haney. You've seen a lot of his fights recently. Does Regis Prograis have anything left?
The only negative thing that I heard come out of your mouth right now was that he's 35, and for a boxer, that's pretty old. Everything else, I mean, losing to Josh Taylor, a former undisputed champion, that's nothing to sneeze at.
That was like 5 years ago.
Doesn't matter. Losing to Devin Haney, another former undisputed champion, and at that time probably pound for pound. No shame there. So he lost to 2 former undisputed champions. So what?
And the Zorrilla fight?
Zorrilla, he didn't look good. Zorrilla didn't come to the fight. He was a back foot fighter. He fought him in Puerto Rico. That could have just been one of those fights that make you look bad. I've had several of those. Many fighters have had several of those. That one night where you just didn't have it against an opponent that didn't come to win. All right, this fight's going to tell us what we have left with Prograis. Prograis, I'm a big fan of, okay? He's a strong, you talk about old school throwback fighters, that's one of them right there, okay? I'm a big fan of him, his mentality, his fighting style, and the opponents that he faces. He's going to be facing Jack Catterall, another southpaw. Southpaw versus southpaw, okay? So normally that's a recipe for a bad matchmaking because the styles, they're not accustomed to fighting each other.
Are you preemptively calling this bad matchmaking?
No, and I'll tell you, no, I am not. No, I am not, because whenever you're dealing with Prograis, you're not going to get a bad fight with him unless you're fighting a guy that's just always on the back foot like Zorrilla. Catterall is a hybrid. He can be forward and be pressure, but he has good enough and swift enough feet to go backwards. El Gato, that's what they call him, the cat, so he prowls around inside and outside, and he's a southpaw as well. I'm going to favor Catterall in this fight, but I'm pushing for Prograis here. And I think he still has a lot left, and we're going to find out in this fight and how he handles this fight against a UK fighter, across the pond fighting in the UK. Catterall's an excellent fighter, man. He's very short. He's about 5'6", I believe, 5'7", but he's really swift on his feet. He's good with his hands. And Regis Prograis is a little bit taller, I think 5'8", heavy hands, but he has flat feet. So again, just like in the Bivol fight, it's going to be fast feet against heavy hands. Heavy hands is going to be Prograis, fast feet is going to be Catterall, and I'm going to favor the swift feet of Catterall in this fight. Another thing, both these guys are accustomed to fighting taller fighters because they're short for their weight division. But now they're both evenly matched. So not only are they both left-handers, they're both shorter fighters, and I think that's going to be tricky. So I'm going to favor the faster feet and the in and out style of El Gato in this one. But we're going to find out what Prograis has left and if this is the last hurrah.
So the reasons to believe in Prograis There are a few of them. One is that he did start boxing late, so there's not a ton of miles on his tires. He did lose to a top 10 pound-for-pound guy, in my opinion, in Devin Haney. But the Zorrilla fight was really bad. And I think a younger version of Regis Prograis would have tracked Zorrilla down and would have found a way to stop him. It's not that he lost to Haney, Sergio. It's the way he lost to Haney. Like, he was just wiped out. And that was a fight that he came in brimming with confidence. He didn't believe for 1 second in the buildup that Devin Haney was going to be able to...
He didn't get wiped out. He got outclassed.
But statistically, he got wiped out. Like, didn't he throw like the fewest...
Look, man, wipeout to me means a knockout. Wipeout to me is what Tim Tszyu got. He got wiped out.
Choose your adjective. But he was blanked. I think that set CompuBox records at the time.
He got outclassed.
Completely outclassed by Devin Haney. Catterall's not on Haney's level, but he's pretty good. And I don't know that this 35-year-old version of Regis has enough left. Now, Regis, I talked to him this week, and one of the things he told me was that the mistakes he made in the Haney fight involved his team, right? We know during that fight, Julian Tszyu was part of his team. He was the head trainer, but Bobby Benton was still there. He did training camp with Regis. Bobby Benton was Regis' trainer, like, from the very beginning, like, for a long time. All of a sudden, Julian Tszyu, who both of us have respect for, good boxing mind, he comes in, and you've got two head trainers kind of in the corner, two cooks in the kitchen, and that never works, right? Like, you've got to believe in one philosophy, and I believe that going into that fight, he had two different philosophies kind of going through his mind. Now, maybe that wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe Haney is so disciplined and so good that he still would have beaten him, but maybe you think that because of that, Regis can be better. Bobby's his head trainer for this. He's going to be in the corner as the head man for this fight, so maybe that makes a difference. But I don't know. I think this could be this. I think this is kind of fight where Catterall could win like 8-4, 9-3. That's kind of how I'm sort of seeing this fight play out.
I'm favoring Catterall as well, but I also can see Prograis rocking Catterall and going for the stoppage. I think that's the only way I think Prograis wins this fight is by stoppage. Because one, I don't think he gets a decision in the UK. Two, I think if he lets Catterall fight his fight with the better feet and the angles that he uses, he fights more like a southpaw. If you're going to be a left-hander, you want to use those left-handed angles. You want to use the left-handed strategy. You want to come in with the right punches. Prograis fights southpaws really well. So let me just throw that out there. I mean, 2 of his last 4 opponents have been southpaw, and he knocked both of them out. The problem is Catterall's last 3 of his last 4 opponents have been southpaw, so he fights them very well. Doesn't knock them out, but he boxes them and does really well. Okay, so yeah, it's going to be it's a great matchup. Great matchmaking. All right. We went from bad matchmaking to great matchmaking. This is great matchmaking between 2 southpaws. One who should have been probably a world champion in Catterall, still has championship ambitions, versus a former champion that we don't know what he has left. This is great matchmaking.
Should Prograis have moved up? That was my big question for him. He's a career-long 140.
Yeah. Because he's 5'8". He's a stocky 5'8", but he's not. If you notice, he's not lean. He's a muscular fighter, but it's that soft. Maybe not the right word. He fills out 140 nicely, but he doesn't look muscular. He doesn't look ripped at 140.
Long time to be at one weight class, though.
But could you imagine him at 147? If he's not ripped at 140, what makes you think he's going to be lean and ripped at 147? And at 5'8", I just think that's the border. You got a lot of tall welterweights. 140 is his limit. That's the reason he's a career junior welterweight. I mean, I was a career middleweight. I was too big for junior middleweight and way too small for middleweight or super middleweight. So I just think he's stuck in categories.
Yeah, I kind of thought he should have given it some thought, taking a tune-up fight at 147. There are 4 belt holders right now at 147. Maybe he could have gotten a fight with one of them. And look, I think he can he could be competitive at least in a fight against Stanionis, against Mario Barrios, against Brian Norman. Not against Boots Ennis. I think Boots is too big for him. But any one of those fights, I might have leaned towards that decision after doing all he's done at 140. Few quick hits on what we saw last week in Saudi Arabia. I want to get your take on. Dmitry Bivol has filed a protest with the sanctioning bodies over his loss to Artur Beterbiev. Bivol's team was livid. They thought Bivol did enough to win the fight. No, you thought he did enough to win the fight. Do you think that protest is going anywhere, though?
It's not going anywhere. I mean, once those scorecards get turned in, it's almost impossible to have them, what's the word? Not to pull back. Not recanted, because that's for words. To bring back the scorecards. What's the word I'm looking for? You're a writer.
Withdraw?
No, not withdraw, because that's like taking out money. Whatever. It's taking back what's already,
It's already been adjudicated, yes.
There you go. There you go. That's the word. All right, so it's already recorded and adjudicated, and you're not going to adjudicate it. All right, so
that's also not a word.
You're not going to get nowhere with this. All right, usually when you take it up to the commission, and it's hard to bring back decisions. For instance, I'll give you an example. My second fight with Daniel Jacobs, I mean, it ended because I couldn't continue because of an injury. Because of an injury to my first fight, my injury to my ankle. I went to the New York State Commission. I tried to get that adjudicated and it got nowhere. You're going to
start using adjudicated every...
I don't know how to spell it. I don't know what it means, but I know what I know what it says when you put it in context. But yes, I couldn't do it. So there's no way Bivol's going to have that fight. Give me another word for adjudicated. No, just once it's already stamped and sealed,
I agree with you, because it wasn't. You can call it a disputed decision. It wasn't a robbery.
No.
Like, a lot of people thought Beterbiev did enough to win the fight. Maybe 8-4 Beterbiev was a little bit too wide, but you can't dispute the outcome of the fight. I had it a draw. One judge had it a draw, but two judges scoring it for Artur Beterbiev. That is not.
You know what's funny about that fight, man? So many fight fans and so many passionate fans thought that Beterbiev deserved the victory. He kept coming forward. He was a harder puncher. He was the monster. But he didn't really land monster punches. But everyone in boxing, I'm talking about professional fighters, especially champions and former champions and broadcasters, they all lean towards Bivol. I didn't get one champion or former champion that said, "Oh no, Beterbiev won that fight." None, not one. I didn't see one on Twitter. I didn't see one on record, and I'm yet to still see one.
I think Tim Bradley at the time scored it for Beterbiev. I think he said after the fact that he went back and rescored it for Bivol, but at the time he scored it for Beterbiev. Again, I had it a draw. I thought that Beterbiev swept the final few rounds, but I thought in the first 9. Right at 6-3 Bivol, I thought he did enough to build that early lead. But regardless, a protest is not going anywhere. Hopefully, these two guys do get the rematch in 2025.
I don't think we'll see a rematch either, but...
Well, I think we're going to see it. So, on the undercard, Fabio Wardley took care of business. Took care of business against Frazier Clark. You had Fabio Wardley winning that fight going in. I don't think either one of us expected that. The first round knockout from Fabio Wardley. He is now a player in the heavyweight division. Like, how good is he? You watch him fight, like, who should he be in with? What type of fights are you ready for Fabio Wardley?
Well, look, I think we should keep putting him in against top contenders. Don't rush him to a world title yet. I still see him learning, but he's a 6'5" heavyweight, so he fits in nicely in this new era of monster heavyweights that are 6'4", 6'5" plus. So he fits in nicely as far as height and power. I mean, he's a big power puncher, nice right hand. But I do like his feet. So, he has swift feet for a heavyweight. So he brings something else to the table, something that, like, for instance, Joe Joyce, even though he doesn't show it much, he does have swift feet when he decides to use them. He has athletic feet. I like heavyweights that can move around when they can. That's the reason Alexander Usyk is wiping the floor with every big, stationary, heavyweight they put in front of him, because he knows how to use those angles. I can see Wardley bringing a little bit of that to the heavyweight fights, and I just think if they maneuver him nicely, don't really rush him, and make him an attraction in the UK, absolutely. Not only that, Mannix, like my trainer likes to say, he has a name, Fabio Wardley. That doesn't sound like a fighter, man. Fabio, you think of that dude in the novels.
Yes.
With the long hair.
I can't believe it's not butter.
Yeah, that guy. Fabio Wardley. He has a name. So just build him up nicely, and I think he's going to be right in position to become a future heavyweight champion.
Well, he's not like 22, though. He's 29, so he's in that kind of sweet spot for a heavyweight. Now, I'm not saying rush him in with a top 5 guy right now. He signed with Queensberry. They're going to have fights for him. But like a Otto Wallin type
there you go.
Jermaine Franklin type.
There you
Get
go.
him like a top 10,
There
top
you
15 heavyweight, and then see where you're at with the heavyweight division.
What you don't do is rush him and do what you did.
I wouldn't do Joseph
for
Parker
instance,
right now.
You know who they rushed is Philip Ergovich, but it was because Ergovich wanted to be rushed, and he was in that
the
age.
IBF number one contender.
He was in that age where he already started late. He had that amateur experience. But look at what happened, man. He got knocked out against a guy he should have knocked out in Dubois. So there you go. All that hard work, all that building, all that career out the window just because you couldn't just be patient instead of rushing your fighter. So I think if they take their time, even though he is 29, man, he's a heavyweight. Heavyweights could fight later than any other fighters, and if he has that power, he can definitely fight until his mid-30s. So
you know what I loved?
Be patient.
I don't know if you saw the clip, but Fabio Wardley put it out there on social media. It was of Ben Davison showing him how to fight against Frazier Clark.
Yep.
To kind of summarize it,
paw off the jab.
Davison pointed out that the way Clark's hands come up, like you want to throw a jab, but you're throwing the jab to paw away his left hand so you can throw the overhand right. And that's exactly what happened in that fight against Frazier Clark. That was strategy meeting execution. I'm glad that Ben Davison got some credit for it because he was getting killed for the AJ stuff, which wasn't really his fault.
Not his fault.
AJ got just outworked and outmuscled by a guy.
Robert McCracken took shit for AJ. Robert Garcia took shit for AJ. Now Ben Davison took shit
Ben's
for AJ.
a really smart guy.
Everybody but AJ gets shit.
I
No,
know.
Ben Davison's one of the best boxing minds and the best boxing communicators. He can get done more in 60 seconds in that corner than any great trainer right now in boxing in that neutral corner where you have that 1 minute break. Ben Davison is a mastermind in boxing. He's one of my favorite trainers.
All right, last one on this. Ben Whittaker against Liam Cameron. What was your reaction when Ben Whittaker went tumbling out of the ring and then claimed an ankle injury to get out of the fight?
Oh, stop, man. I mean, he went out of the ring. He was in there with a fighter in Cameron who's never been stopped, a fighter that's been active. 4 fights this year for Cameron. Let me tell you what. Another bad matchmaking there for Whittaker, man. I'm telling you, this was a week of bad matchmaking because Whittaker is a former... he's an Olympian. He's an undefeated fighter. They have high hopes for him. You got to be careful who you match him in with. I'm not saying that
Liam Cameron was great coming in.
I'm not saying Liam Cameron's a killer, but he has 30 fights, never knocked out. He's been in there with some solid names. 4th fight this year, okay? So activity never stopped. It was a very dangerous matchmaking. Not dangerous. It was a lot of confidence for Whittaker to match him up this early with only 8 fights. Luckily, he didn't hiccup there. He almost did, but he didn't hiccup there. So they gotta be careful going forward who they put him up with.
Wait, so you thought that was a real injury?
No.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at here because to this point, as we record this, there really hasn't been much clarity on what the injury was.
Yeah.
Like if it was a serious injury, like an ACL tear, an Achilles tear, some kind of chipped bone, I don't know, anything. But I think I've heard sprained ankle is what it's being displayed at, which I still don't get. I've watched the replay of that tumble over the ring a few times. That right leg doesn't look like it sprains at all. So I will stand by my opinion of he didn't want any more of Liam Cameron in that fight. And that's bad for Ben Whittaker, who has a terrible last name for someone that you think quit in a fight. Because all of a sudden, you become Whittaker. That's what your name becomes if people think you gave up in that fight.
I never heard of Whittaker ever in my life. I think Whittaker, I think of the great Sweet Pea.
Yes,
Whittaker.
but if you think someone gave up or you think someone found a way out, which most people I've heard in boxing say, Whittaker.
Well, that's clever, but
That's what I'm saying.
Well, listen, he got a lot of social media hits with that one fight where he was showing off and beating the hell out of this guy.
He got exposed though. Like, he's got a lot of style. And I said going into that fight, Sergio, I'm like, we're going to find out if there is substance to the style. I thought going in, Ben Whittaker had as much of a ceiling as any prospect in boxing because people know him. Like you see all these highlights and you're like, that's a guy I want to see. Like that's a guy I want endorsing my stuff. But that was his first chance to show that there was substance behind the style, and he failed that test miserably.
So did his team for matching him up against a veteran with 30 fights.
Do you want any fights to happen?
30 fights who's never been knocked out and has been active with his 4th fight.
How many cab drivers do you want fighters to take on?
At 8-0, I'll take a couple more cab drivers. Wait until he's 13, 14, 15-0. Then you can start putting him up against the the Liam Camerons of the world. But you got to be careful, man. This is a science. It's a sweet science inside the ring, and it's a sweet science matchmaking outside the ring. You got to be careful with fighters that, especially Olympians, where you're backing them with so much money. They bring a wealth of experience from the amateurs, but the pro game's a different level, man. You want to avoid tough guys that have never been knocked out, that have been in there with tough guys. And that's exactly what this
But
Liam
isn't
Cameron
that the
was.
next level for a prospect to fight a guy that's never been knocked out?
It is the next level, but the next level doesn't start until you're on the double-digit number. When you're 10-0, 12-0, 14-0, that's when you start testing them little by little. Because it's a natural process, Mannix. You go from 4-rounders, 6-rounders, 8-rounders, 10-rounders, championship fights.
I agree, and that was his second 10-round fight.
And this is how it unfolds in opponents. You get them guys that are accustomed to going down, guys that have only been knocked down a couple of times, and then one that's never been down. But if he's never been down, make sure he wasn't active.
I swear to God, you think everyone is a killer. Like, you think anyone that's never been knocked out and has like 25 plus pro fights is an absolute killer. Liam Cameron, to me, was the right opponent at the right time for this guy. Ben Whittaker is 27 years old. He is a former Olympic silver medalist with a deep amateur background. He had 8 pro fights, went the distance with a guy who I think was undefeated in his last fight. So he had been built towards that point. His last fight against was a draw with Lyndon Arthur, who is okay as well. So I don't think that Liam Cameron was this terrifying opponent that he should be. You're going to say something dumb here. So I don't think Liam Cameron was the wrong opponent.
Yes, he was, because you'll never see a fighter like your favorite fighter in the world, Jake Paul, fight a guy like Liam Cameron. He fights guys that are accustomed to losing.
You can't compare.
You know what Ben Whittaker should do? He should fight the last 8 opponents that Jake Paul has fought. He'll wipe the floor with all of them.
You cannot compare Jake Paul to Ben Whittaker. They're two different types of fighters.
No, his opponents. Everyone's saying that he's fighting fighters.
You can't compare the guys he's fighting. Like, it's totally different scenario. And he's also like some of the guys he's fighting were kind of the equivalent of the guys Jake Paul was fighting.
No, it was not.
Some of them were.
If you say so, man. Look, I just think they got to be careful. Whittaker is a potential star. I watch him fight. I think he's entertaining. I think he's going to be an exciting fighter. He has good foot speed. He has great footwork. He has an amateur pedigree. He just had a little hiccup right now. I just think they got to be careful moving forward with him. That's it. Matchmaking is going to be key. Matchmaking. That's the word of the week, Chris Mannix.
Oh, I'm so tired of the word matchmaking. All right, Sergio, brand new segment here on the show, Mailbag segment, our first ever, where we take your questions on social media using the hashtag AskMannix or AskMora. And I got a first one from Instagram. This one's for both of us, from Hans Olsen. Should Bud Crawford move up to 160 and go trophy hunting for a title against either Carlos Adames or Erislandy Lara?
No, I don't think he should. And I think, we saw what we saw at 154 with Madrimov and Bud Crawford. I think that's going to be a ceiling. Even though he is, the best pound for pound boxer in the world, there's limits to his size. I think 154 was his limit. He shouldn't go north of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree. It's not the size per se. It's the significance of the fight. And look, Terrence Crawford has won titles in 4 different weight classes. He's been undisputed in 2. He is an unquestioned first ballot Hall of Famer whenever his career is over. Going up to fight Carlos Adames or Erislandy Lara, 2 guys I think he might beat. I think he would beat. Like, Adames is a former 154-pounder. Lara is a former 154-pounder. Like, these guys are not going to have big size advantages over Crawford. I just don't think there's a point to it. There's not a lot of money in it for Terrence Crawford. He should be looking at a mega fight against Canelo Alvarez, or looking at the super welterweight division. Look, maybe Errol Spence surprises us and beats Fundora.
Wait a minute. I can see him with Lara. Lara just, he's still there. He's still on the championship level. And Lara's not a puncher. And
No, I think he wins. I think Crawford wins that fight.
Yeah, that's a
I just don't see I don't see the point. Like, there's how much money is in that fight? Like, Crawford is a money-weight fighter right now, not a middleweight fighter.
There's intrigue, man. Lara's never been he's never been stopped. He holds a title, right? He holds a title now.
He does. He beat Danny Garcia.
There you go. I think that one makes sense, man.
So now you want him to fight?
No, I didn't say want, but who's he going to go from here? Where's he going to go from here?
I think he goes nowhere. I think it's Canelo Alvarez.
There you go.
Bust.
You go against a guy that is very familiar in the boxing game. Lara's fought absolutely everybody. Yeah, I like that fight.
I don't think it does anything for Terrence Crawford. I think Crawford's going to fight for like $45 or $50 million against Canelo, or he's going to walk away.
Well, I love that fight. as a boxer because Lara's never been stopped. Crawford, we know, is going to try to stop him, and it'll be a feather in his cap if he can be the first to stop the Cuban assassin in Erislandy Lara and pick up another strap at 154.
I still don't know what your answer is to the question. Do you want him to fight a Adames or a Lara or not?
Why convince myself right now? So yeah, I think Hans, was that his name? Hans? I think of Hans. I think of the bad guy from Die Hard.
Gruber, yes.
Hans Gruber.
Yes. Shout out Hans Gruber.
Hans, you just convinced me. I like that Lara fight.
All right, this question from Twitter. Lawrence Morgan. What is really going on with PBC and Amazon? No advertising during Thursday Night Football, the homepage for Prime Video. Only a handful of shows that were mostly pay-per-view. Is the end near? This is more a question for me on PBC. I never want to count Al Heyman out because he's proven time and again he is really good at this boxing game. But this PBC deal was announced and it was billed as this double-digit shows, lots of fights on Amazon Prime. Instead, we have gotten 4 pay-per-views with another one coming in December and only 1 fight on Prime Video. Now, that was a great card, and I hope they do more of those types of cards. But I think PBC is in a problematic place right now with this deal because it is not a traditional Showtime, HBO, DAZN type of deal. There isn't a lot of guaranteed money coming from Amazon. They are distributors for these shows, but they are not providers in the traditional way. So I don't think PBC, Al Heyman, they're not going away anytime soon, but this Amazon deal may not be enough for them. They may have to look for other platforms to do deals with to keep their guys active. But that's been a problem with PBC. Even when they had Showtime deals, their guys weren't active enough. They were only fighting once a year. Look, I saw Keith Thurman was calling that Tim Tszyu Murtalia fight. He's fought like once in the last 4.5 years. He's not fought in 2.5 years. Like, it's a former welterweight champion, unified welterweight champion. So I don't think the relationship is ending between PBC and Amazon, but I do think to keep their fighters busy, they may have to get them out there more on other platforms. This question for both of us from Nando Lamas on Twitter. Should Top Rank and Grandpa Bob make a play for Canelo Alvarez? Mbili and Beterbiev in 2025 would be fun. Canelo on ESPN would be good for the sport as well. Let you take that first.
It's the Bob father, or not Grandpa Bob. Put some respect on his name. That's a legend in Bob Arum. But I like that deal. I mean, ESPN, it's distributed in a lot more households, I would think.
In the U.S., for sure.
In the U.S., yes. And I think, the main market for Canelo is the U.S., even though he is a global fighter. And we know that he's his own jefe, his own boss. He goes from the zone to PBC. And I could see him going to ESPN. It's not the worst idea in the world, man. I really like that idea because he's a global star. And when you talk about Canelo, the casual knows him. So if you can put him up where, on an ESPN platform, as long as ESPN has a bad habit of putting basketball games that they go overtime and they go into the boxing. If they don't do that, I'm in
more
for
college football than it is basketball.
Well, if they don't do that, sport block. If they don't sport block boxing and a star like Canelo,
Did you call it sport blocking?
Yeah. Okay. I'm all for Canelo on ESPN.
I also love the idea of Canelo on ESPN. I think that's a way to take his popularity to another level. I also know it is almost certainly never going to happen. Primarily because Top Rank officials have told me in the past that they have no intention of guaranteeing Canelo the kind of money he's looking for.
Right.
Like if Canelo wanted to come over to ESPN and Top Rank and do a deal for a fight that is based on pay-per-view revenue, I think Top Rank ESPN would be all for that. But Top Rank is not putting up 40, 45, $50 million, whatever it is, for Canelo to fight guaranteed. They're not going to take that type of risk, and I don't think ESPN is going to back them with that type of risk. So,
well, hold on, man. But I think at this point of Canelo's career, he's going to fight monsters. He's going to stay busy with guys that make sense, and he doesn't mind stepping down in name and in recognition because he's already the best fighter in the world with the most profitable fighter. Now he just wants eyeballs, and he wants to be his own boss, going from network to network, picking and choosing who he fights, I don't think money's really an issue anymore. I think he'll cut down in pay just to stay active, relevant, and be on a new network with new set of eyeballs. I think Canelo's that type of boss.
Who should Canelo fight in his next fight?
That's a tricky one, man. They have to be at 168. You know, if he just fought a fighter that no one really demanded in Edgar Berlanga, I think that type of opponent will make sense. He's not far from a Diego Pacheco, I'll tell you that. He's not far from a Diego Pacheco. And that fight will be very popular in the Southern California area, a fight that Canelo everyone would favor him heavily. And Pacheco is slowly but surely earning that jackpot.
I thought it was interesting to see Canelo at the Japanese fight recently. He was there.
You know, there you go.
Inoue's brother.
We say he's his own boss. He doesn't have to fight a Japanese fighter to fight in Japan.
But he can fight, and he can fight anybody over
there. There you go.
And make a pile of money.
There you go. That's what I think he should do. I think he should fight in Japan against anybody. Doesn't matter who he fights.
I think Canelo for his next fight should look globally. Maybe he fights in Japan against, hell, it could be William Scull. Like who knows? Or the UK. I think Chris Eubank has become an interesting opportunity. Eubank makes a little more sense. I think Eubank though is. We saw what happened after his win. Conor Benn got in the ring. It sure sounds like that fight's going to be made once again. So domestically for Eubank, that's a huge money fight. But if Canelo got interested at 168, I could see a Eubank fight over in the UK. Mm-hmm. But I think Canelo's got some more global options for his next fight than maybe domestic. Last one for you. From Everything Boxing, it's the Instagram account. Your thoughts on Bob Arum saying the Saudis will only do Riyadh season events in Riyadh moving forward. Now, we saw this past year, we had a great Riyadh season card in California that was headlined by Bud Crawford, an even better one over in the UK, Anthony Joshua against Danny Dubois. Bob Arum is out there saying now that it sounds like these Riyadh season events are only going to take place in Riyadh. How do you feel about that?
If they're putting up the money and the best are fighting the best, then I think every boxing fan should be thrilled. That's the good part. The bad part is, not everyone wants to fly to Saudi Arabia to watch these fights, but they're doing a great job of production. They're doing a hell of a job promoting. I mean, every time one of these fights gets announced, it's like a movie trailer comes out to promote the fights. So the promotion, the fights, we're getting the best fighting the best because the money's up there. So if it takes that, for the fights to be simply and strategically just in Riyadh, I'm all for it if we're still getting the best. I don't care. I do not care. As a boxing fan, I don't care as long as we're getting the best fighting the best.
I think the super fights should continue to take place in Saudi Arabia because Turkey Al-Sheikh and the Saudis get them done, right? Like they say, we want this fight.
Them done right.
I do think we can't forget the US and the UK markets and the media that comes with it, right? Like that's the one thing that's missing from a lot of these Saudi shows. You don't get the media exposure that you get at other shows. Like you're just not going to get a lot of US-based journalists flying to Saudi Arabia. You'll probably get more British-based journalists flying to Saudi, but it's just not the same thing. You're not gaining the same kind of traction. So absolutely. Riyadh season officially, I think, goes like October to February, March, something in that area. Do as many big events there as you can, but don't wait on these events. Don't wait to have all these big events over there. Have a lot in the US, in the UK, and continue to build your fighters that way. Like these Saudi events, these Riyadh season events, they should be like the prize. Like you get to a certain point.
I see what you're saying, yeah. And then the playoff games or the regular season games should be somewhere else. I could see that, yeah.
So I think that's probably the best way to go. We're going to Saudi.
Absolutely, next month.
Have you told your wife you're going to be gone for a week?
Week and a half.
Week and a half. That's right, because right before then, we're at the Boots Ennis fight.
It's the kids.
What kind of deal with the devil are you going to have to make to get that week and a half off?
It's work, Mannix. It's work. I got to provide.
I know. Yes, you do have to provide. Yes. Are you and your wife going to go adjudicate that?
Philadelphia to Riyadh.
Yes. That quick hop.
Can't wait.